versus Tech. We got Chris Pettigrew, Kyle Souza, Tech man. No, just kidding. He is a robot, but in human form. Welcome to our Go Live. We try to do it every Wednesday at 11 a.m. We like to talk about technology in general, right? We're pretty much energy guys, but today we're going to talk about data conversion and integration. Probably share some horror stories, some success stories, some thoughts and things like that. As normal, most of the time, maybe not so much recently, we usually try to start off with a little bit of news, a little bit of tech news that's out there. Big buzz that's going on right now out in the industry or the tech world is ChatGPT, right? So if you guys haven't heard about it, you GPT. Go out there. Yeah, GPT.
Reminds me of the Goldbergs. Sorry.
You know, as the acronym, I don't know what that means, but is that bad that I said that live on LinkedIn? I don't know. But I get the chat part.
Nobody knows. It's what makes it mysterious.
Oh, general processing thing.
Yes, there we go. The general processing. Yeah, perfect. I think that makes
it's like a Willy Wonka situation.
Yeah.
It's a general processing thing, of making widgets. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit of tech news today. Let's share our screen. What's our tech news? It's about ChatGPT. So over the weekend, I was playing with ChatGPT and I wanted to load it on my phone. I have never done that before. I've always used either my internet, Google Chrome or Bing, or Edge. I think ChatGPT got me into using Edge again a little bit. And I went into Google Play and there were like 40 different, and they all said ChatGPT on them. Although I started looking at, none of them were made by OpenAI.
Nope.
So I started thinking, I wonder what's going on here. Is that what's happening? And so this article we found, is apps are copying it because it's just the hottest thing to talk about right now.
Oh, absolutely. And there is no official OpenAI ChatGPT app.
Learn that
on mobile devices.
Yep.
But someone can call it ChatGPT and sucker someone into downloading their app, watching some ads, clicking on something, or even buying a subscription.
So just so you can use it from your mobile device, go through your browser. That's what I did, and it worked out well. There wasn't any kind of issues with it. It looked exactly the same as it did on my PC and my laptop, and I was really happy I was able to use it for all the different crazy stuff that I want to try to get ChatGPT to do. Probably should just have a conversation about like things people ask ChatGPT to do,
Everything.
They do. It's very interesting. So something that's also popping up with this conversation, a little bit of tech news, and everybody should always be aware about, cybersecurity, what you load, what you use, softwares you download, free software, shareware, the kind of used to be a word. I just date myself by saying some of that stuff. At the end of the day, there's been some articles I've also read about AI calling applications that are now calling people. I've been getting some strange phone calls where a person will talk and it'll sound like a human being person talking to me, but then I always ask weird questions to validate, if it is or not. And then I say something like, "Are you real?" And then it goes, "Thanks. I appreciate, you paying attention. And please press 1 to unsubscribe." So I'm like, click 1 because they're calling me about some car I don't own or a knee brace that I'm going to probably need in 40 years or whatever. But it's artificial intelligence doing it, and it's not like the robots. It's pretty good. It's either a good recording or something. But
one trick that I like to use is I ask it to say a certain word if it's real. Like, hey, if you're real, say banana. And like a lot of times they're just like, of course I'm real.
Like, have you gotten replies?
I've gotten replies.
I ask them, "Are you a robot?" And it just goes into a whole, the script. We're calling you about blah blah blah, and I'm like, oh, another number I should have never answered. Every time I want to go answer one, I'm finally going to give in. It's always a darn false call. So pay attention to what's out there. Anything that gets real popular always has, a bad side behind it. It has nothing to do with OpenAI. Has nothing to do with the Chat GPT. It's just the fact that If you have, gone into the Chat GPT world, you can go on social media, Reddit, Quora, Facebook, any kind of Instagram. There are so many GPT groups out there.
There are.
I've joined so many of them just to learn more about it. And it's like sifting through insanity sometimes. And then you have all the people that talk about it, and you don't know if anything's real or if it can really do that. And,
yeah, there's so many people faking what it can do.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. I think that's a huge thing right now. It's like I was talking to a potential client a couple weeks ago, and somehow Chat GPT came up, and we were talking about content management systems and saving PDFs and tips and images and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "Oh yeah, Chat GPT would be really good for that." And I didn't really say much to it because I thought, you don't really know what Chat GPT is, do you? And I can understand that a lot of people don't grasp what it really does because the information out there is just crazy.
Yeah, it's overwhelming if you look into it, and it's so superficial if you're not in it.
Yeah. So, tech news for the day, as with anything, be careful what you download. And hey, my kids are notorious for downloading those free games that let you play a couple of levels, and the next thing you know, they're popping up with more free games, and then you're wanting to pay for the game, and
that or the $6 a week subscription.
Yes.
What?
Yes, I've had to put some codes on things to make sure that those subscriptions don't just pop up in my Amazon account. But yeah, I don't even know how many apps I might have bought that I didn't know about that I need to figure out those are movies or those are my kids. But I stopped all that. Good old parental controls. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. So so watch out what you load. We'll get back in and talking. We talked about Chat GPT before. We're going to be talking a lot more about the Chat GPT 4 that's coming out and some things that's coming out going to be doing with it. So we're really excited about that tech. But I think sifting through the craziness of it right now is just pretty wild.
Yes.
Well, cool. All right, Kyle, man. So this is your wheelhouse, man. This is how I know Kyle. Data conversion and implementation, integration. Start it off. What's your how would you start that conversation? If we're going to sit here and talk about it.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they think of a data conversion, they're really describing an ETL or extract, transform, and load process, where they're taking stuff from one data source and putting it into a different database. And that database already has existing data in it, so they need to bring this alongside it and put it there. But really, people do kind of small scale data conversions all the time. When you get emailed a spreadsheet from Bob and a spreadsheet from Samantha, and you've got to compare the two spreadsheets. I mean, that really plays into the data conversion game also.
So, let's just you talk data conversion. You're talking about, I got a spreadsheet. I need to compare something.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a simple contact list. It could be personal finances.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to share that with your spouse or your accountant. Maybe you're keeping track of some things in just a general spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. I know that, spreadsheets can be used for almost anything. I've had spreadsheets on vacations.
Yeah.
As to the plan and maybe a budget, or maybe you're budgeting out of vacation.
There's a different way to vacation.
Is there? I don't know.
That's how I do it.
I showed everybody my spreadsheet. Nobody cared, but we're going on the dolphin adventure. At the end of the day, can I just take my data from one software to another when I'm done with that software, unhappy with it? No, that's not how it goes, right?
That's the dream, but no.
So I think even to today, there's a lot of people that I talk to that, are able to get their data out of something. And this isn't like a vacation spreadsheet. We're talking about a total accounting general ledger, total system export, for a couple of reasons. Let's say maybe the software is being defunct. They've raised the prices so high that nobody wants to use anymore. It's now been priced out at the end of the day. Old tech. So you have years and years and years of this data, and you start shopping for a new software and you find it, you're happy with it, you like what you see, there's a price that is involved, and then you go export all your stuff and what are your choices at that point in time to get into the new software?
You have those situations. Then also there's a situation where you just have two systems that need to talk to each other and they're not made to, and you have to create that middle ground with them. And your options are get the data out, usually to Excel. Maybe you have some SQL scripts, maybe, if you're not using Excel, but most of the time you get everything out to Excel, either multiple spreadsheets or one spreadsheet with multiple tabs. There will be hundreds of thousands of rows in there. And you have to figure out how to take your square pegs and put them into round holes. And there may need to be some changes made. I've worked on systems that can't have IDs more than 10 characters going to a system where it can't have an ID that's less than 12 characters. So you got to add characters to it or vice versa. And by ID, I mean unique identifier, right? That's the big thing, that if you have two data sets that have some sort of shared information, like if you have what's called production data for a well and accounting data for a well,
like revenue information.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So how much oil did it get? All that stuff coming from the road commission or from your regulatory body.
Yeah.
And
inventory versus sales.
Yeah, all that. You need an ID that's the same between the two systems, that's unique per well, to be able to match that up. And
why can't we just use the name? Wouldn't that be unique enough? A name of a product, name of a item, name of an oil and gas well, name of a solar farm. What's the issue with that? Why do we have to have this ID? And what if we don't have an ID?
Well, so two reasons you can't just use the name are like cheeseburger, right? If I go order a cheeseburger from McDonald's and a cheeseburger from Burger King, they're different. They're different things with the same name, right? So you could have the same well name in different states, right? So it may not really be unique, but then also depending on what system it came out, they may have something like a character limit or what special characters are even allowed to be in the name from a database perspective that changes the name. So the Chris Pettigrew number 1H in one database might be Chris Pettigrew number sign 1H, and in a different database might be an O period instead of the number sign.
Okay.
Right. So it's the same name, but it's written differently, so they don't match up. And when you're dealing with Excel, unless you get real fancy, that they're just not going to gel. And even if you do get real fancy, a lot of times names they won't match up. So yeah, you have to create unique identifiers, and sometimes you got to do that legwork if there's not unique IDs.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You have to create.
You mean by creating the unique ID, something that you can merge to?
You have to look at everything that doesn't match and say, okay, this equals this,
right? And
then create a unique ID that connects the two.
So at the end of the day, I was like, well, let's just use the name. Let's use something else. You do have to have something very unique. And you're correct. Things can be spelled differently. It could be abbreviated. Is cheeseburger spelled properly with cheese and burger, or is it CHEEZ?
That's right.
And using simpler tools and even some more advanced tools, we've attempted these things before and have gotten through a lot of the data. But at the end of the day, we have not found a tool that can adapt for that NO.1 #.1, just one,
Right.
3 different naming systems, all even though they may say Chris Pettigrew on them. In the oil and gas world, there could be a Chris Pettigrew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who knows?
Right.
How big my ranch is, or how many wells are named after me, or more so my son, or whatever it may be. So
yeah,
and that's been a pretty big struggle in our data conversion, issues. And I think a lot of times we get confronted with, well, we already have things that are that match up. Let's just make this match. It's just like a human has to do it at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's that. Or people may think they're unique, but actually they've reused the same ID multiple times. We've run into that. And then also, talking about advanced tools, there are some advanced tools out there. Alteryx, 9, things like that.
Yeah, we've used Tableau, Alteryx. It's helped us, but none of them has ever solved the exact match issue.
Right, none of it solve that, and those systems are designed to have highly standardized data sources. And so when you have these variables in there, they just don't know how to account for that. And when you create a whole data pipeline, you can't manipulate it in the middle of the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of that data pipeline, you can't tweak something as it's going through. So a lot of times I just find going from the source table out to Excel, do all the stuff, put it into the destination data to be the most effective method for it, unless it's something that needs to happen on a regular database, and we could create some standardization.
So you're kind of talking about like mapping data from one source to another to move it around at this point in time. It could be that's a data conversion project from software to software or whatnot. What about taking data from multiple sources and then trying to compile that together to do analytics? What kind of things we run into with that?
All right. So again, the unique ID issue, right? That comes into play. But even when there's not the unique ID issue, the question becomes, well, what data is relevant, right? So for example, from a GIS perspective, get some parcels from a county. They might have 50 attributes on there. And it's like, well, do you need the landowner's second mailing address? Maybe you do for this project. Maybe you don't. So knowing what you want to do with the data helps, because the less you have to look at, the more efficient you're going to be working with it. And then when you do some comparisons and you find differences, knowing what to do with those differences, which one's the authoritative data set.
Yeah.
And so, I did one yesterday where I had a bunch of county parcels, and the person that I was doing it for wanted the township range and section information on the parcels. That wasn't on there.
Okay.
So brought that in from, did what's called a spatial join inside ArcGIS, and then had to it came in as one column, had to break it out into 3 columns. And the challenge there was, well, what happens if you have a parcel that sneaks into 2 separate counties or 2 separate sections?
Right. Your key piece there was I spatially joined that data.
Yeah.
So now you have a somewhat of a join, but again, that's using a different data source to join that information. Yeah. So first we talked about unique identifiers and just doing data to data. Now you're using a software that has geographic information or GIS system, right? And you're correct. If the lines don't match up, or if it falls over, under, or within a boundary, it could also give you more data or less data.
Yep.
Right. And you don't even know that happened until you export it out and double check it.
Oh yeah. That reminds me of another situation where thinking about how land data is organized, right? You might have it organized by tract, and that tract could have multiple landowners on it, even just from a service perspective. But then your second data set might have it organized by surface owner and have all their tracts associated with that surface owner. And when you're trying to mash up those 2 databases, you realize these are 2 totally different things.
Yeah.
I've got a bowl of sugar and a bowl of salt, and they may look very similar, but they do not.
Leave them both out and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we don't put sugar in a salt shaker.
That's right.
Well, that would be not really a good prank. I guess not as good as undo the salt shaker and leave it going.
Oh yeah.
So then you have data conversions.
I love salt. Never been attacked by snails.
Let's put more on it, right?
That's right.
I think that my experience with data conversions is usually starting off on a level of, we have to get this done yesterday. We need to make this move. We have to get this data together. We have maybe acquired something and we need to put it into our system. Lots of different combination scenarios. And I kind of think of it as you have different people that create different data sets as much as it would be different fruits in a basket. If you're not all apples, then you're not going to be able to say I have 8 apples and put them all together and sort them properly.
Yeah.
I like to use just basic information, but I don't think people really understand the challenges of data conversion. So I like to explain to people that data sets and databases, how they're created, are very individual as much as like Coke and Pepsi is.
Yeah.
They don't work together. If you work at each company, you're not going to allowed to drink the other one. If you're caught in public doing it, they like literally fire you. It's pretty wild, like the restrictions of doing that with such a brand name. But again, there's also intentions that softwares don't want you to be able to just quickly dump your stuff and run away.
It's in their best interest to keep you in their house.
And then what about the flip side? Maybe you're not changing. Maybe you want to grow information and now your software can't ingest certain things. Mm-hmm. So now you're keeping a second data source. You're doing data mining over here. We know people that are taking stuff out of softwares and creating custom reports and putting it on the web and doing things like that too. For customer purposes, for client purposes, because the software itself cannot create the needed reports the client wants, which we don't know why it can't create it, but it just, the designers didn't do it.
It's not in there.
It wasn't available. Maybe it wasn't thought about at that time, I'm not saying that in a negative way. So I see a lot of people that are forced into different types of data conversions, and not many of the conversations that I have with people are, a lot of eyebrows go like this once we can get done talking to them. Mm-hmm. We start to show them the dings and everything. It's like the bearer of bad news, or the home inspectors, where they're like showing every little thing and taping the wall, and this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to hear those things.
I think a lot of people undervalue the starting step of understanding where the data is coming from and understanding where the data is going to, and figuring out that path. Just a lot of people, I think, they look on the surface and they go like, well, a burger's a burger, right? What's the difference?
Yeah, taco's a taco. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences.
There is.
And we got to account for those.
Especially here in Texas, lots of different tacos.
Yeah, that's right. As there should be.
So, there's nuances in data conversion. There's some things that we talk about that we believe everybody needs. What do you think is, your recommendation on making data conversion easy? What would be some things that you would say, people should do so when that time comes, or they want to, do a data conversion, a comparison, and analytics, integration, kind of housekeeping could we do to make our jobs easier?
Yeah, well, garbage in, garbage out. First off, having quality data to start with, making sure that you cleaned it up, that everything's in order in the first place.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Second thing, understanding the data and what you want to do with it. Like I said, that way you can ignore the noise of all the extra pieces, if there are any. And then I think that the easiest thing is to play with it, to try it, to get into it. And then once you figure it out, do it a second time. Because really, that's how I
test the conversion before you go.
Test it, and then after you test it, work through those kinks, clear it out, and do it again, having worked through all the problems.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Garbage in, garbage out. It takes housekeeping. Any program you're using, any data that you're keeping up with. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of human integration into that, and making sure that it's correct, making sure that it's kept up to date, making sure that new data is put into it, that old data is erased if necessary, or archived would be maybe a better way to look at it. So there's a lot of complexities that come into that. And how often are you doing that? We know some people that daily are going into a data set and adding new information, deleting old information, replacing information. Could be owner information, contact information, location information, whatever kind of information comes up, right? And there's, on top of that, you can go out and buy data sets of information. And a lot of that comes predated. So you have to get it up to date. And so, there's many sources out there that, you can go out there and buy, and it's great to have these sources. I think they're definitely a help. So I can't ever knock, why they exist. But when you come down to it, always ask the question, how old is the data that I'm buying from you? Mm-hmm. And if you need something that is literally real time, it's going to take probably a bunch of humans to get that data up to date.
Yep.
Because you most likely don't have the ability or the connections that data source that you bought has. And if they could be up to date, wouldn't you think they would? Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, I hate to use that word, but I would assume that they would. So, I also see a lot of people say, well, we just spent $20,000 on this data set, and it should be good to go. So why can't we just load it and go use it and start, cold calling all these sales leads that are out there? Well, your data set's from 6 months ago.
Yep.
And in the last 6 months, people have changed jobs, left where they are, moved. I mean, I think it could apply almost to anything. If you're trying to do mailers, emails, contact, cold calls, if you're out oil and gas leasing, surface agreement. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If anything's just older than what it is, you have to get that up to date.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize what it takes to get to that part. They just say, I got it. I'm ready to go. This isn't like going to Best Buy and buying a TV. And even then, I remember when I used to work for that company called Yellow and Blue. But at the end of the day, we used to say, what about the cables? What about the add-ons? Anything that you need. What about the surge protector? It just doesn't work out of the box a lot. You have to have a couple other things that go with it.
Well, and I was thinking of buying a computer 20 years ago. Very different than buying a computer today, right?
Everything.
But the moment you bought a computer 20 years ago, it was outdated. Right?
Yeah, you're driving a car off the lot.
Yeah. And like just the next week, something with, 128 megabytes of RAM came out. And
not e-machines. It was the machine that would never become outdated.
Never become outdated.
The
e-machines, rest in peace. That's, but like
half the crowd doesn't even know what we just talked about. Right?
No, that's okay. One day it'll be in the history books.
Just go look it up.
But the moment you download a data set, it becomes a moment in time snapshot.
Right.
And anything that happens after that data set gets downloaded does not exist as far as you're concerned. But also, when was that thing to be downloaded put online, right? That's what you're getting at. When did they create that download?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, this might be the 2023 Q2 download that comes out May 17th of 2023, but they may have been gathering the data in March of 2023. And the people they gathered it from may have created it in December of 2022. And so you think you're getting the latest and greatest because it's from today, but actually it has all this legacy behind it that you just can't control.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue into, I guess, the last part of the show is, keeping two sets of data. I mean, what are your thoughts on that situation?
Sometimes it's a necessary evil, for lack of a better term. I don't enjoy it. I try not to advocate it. I have run into situations where I don't see a solution other than that, though.
It seems so common. I meet people all the time that they have softwares they work in, they have spreadsheets they work in, and then they have like a Chris folder. Mm-hmm. And that's the folder that you use. You don't even use the software. You're not even using other people's stuff. You're using the stuff you created from exports and data conversions and integrations, but you're never replicating that back into the software for multi-user systems. It's my biggest fear is to find that second or third set of books, so to say. Yeah. And wonder, wait a second, you have this whole entire world going on here, but yet you operate in that thing.
But what's the point of having data you don't trust? I did a division order project for somebody once. We had to compare the division orders to what they had in their DO database to see if the division orders were correct, right? Okay, great. Did it. A lot of stuff matched up. Great. He's like, well, did you rerun the calculations for the division orders? Well, why would I rerun the calculations if you have a database that says this is the answer? Well, because we don't know if that calculated correctly. It's like, okay, well, I can do that. Got to plan that from the start, though.
Well, it takes multiple steps. One thing, checking a number exists or a thing exists, and two, using multiple sources of information to calculate an answer.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but why do you have an answer if you don't trust it? Like, what's the point of it?
Just call it one.
Yeah.
That's
what I
don't stick it in there. Maybe the answer is don't. I think I see people do that too. Instead of trying, they just don't, and then you live in a world of less. Yeah. And when the time comes to, need an answer or whatever's going on, you just have to literally look up and say, that's not going to happen. I don't have that answer. Why? Well, I never did it. I never tracked that. It's too difficult to do.
I think people also need to make sure that they're updating the database. Like you said, in my Kyle folder, I go do all this work. And if I never transition that over to the main database, no one else has access to that.
Yeah, I mean, your Kyle folder is great and all, but it should be a working folder, and there should be a data bank at the end of the day.
Right. Should be an authoritative place for everybody to look.
So I think the key to a good data conversion is that authoritative place, the data bank, the brain that operates. You can have different sets. You can have different reasons for them. Sometimes you may even have to create them, and that's okay. But not feeding back to the brain whatever discoveries you make in 5 or 6 other points of data is now starting to create 5 brains. Mm-hmm. And what do you do to manage that? And can you manage that? And how many people are involved in that? So there's a lot to think about when it comes down to data and data conversion and integration. And I think some people live it and they thrive in it. And some people have all the way to the spectrum of, this should just work, right? Because it's a computer and
I wish
it's a database. Isn't it all in SQL? Can't we just move it over? No, even to the simplest things, changing from QuickBooks to a different accounting system, it's minimally mapping out from one to another, different columns.
Well, if you want to get technical with it, you could have a column in a database that has a number in it, but it's technically a text column versus different types of columns, and depending on how the system, it just won't work.
You're right. I mean, I think we could probably sit here and talk all day. There's another one I was messing with the other day on data conversion, which was there were formulas in that spreadsheet with answers. Didn't know that those were formulas because I wasn't clicking every row to figure out whether they used some kind of sum if or a pit. Usually you can see pivot tables, but a lot of times it's just a basic formula, a couple different rows making up something. And you go to do a data conversion or you go to move it, and it just totally messes it all up because that entire cell is not a value cell.
The value is the formula, not the answer to the formula.
Exactly. So you go back and you have to take the value, and change it over and integrate that back in. And you have to watch out. So simple to take line to line information. This was a formula. You change it to a value, and then all of a sudden it's off by 1. Off by 1 in multiple places.
And rounding comes into play. And I'm a big fan of the clean and trim formulas or functions inside of Excel. So if you're dealing with these, check out clean and trim.
So, I guess at the end of the day, when we talk about data conversion, it's a great thing. Is there ever a time where you should just throw in the towel and say, this is not worth the time, the money, the effort? And when do you do that, Kyle? Or when do you know? Maybe is a better question.
Ooh, knowing is harder. Sometimes you got to get a little bit down the road. As C.S. Lewis put it, if 2 men are traveling down the wrong road, the one who turns back first is the one who's further ahead. So for me, sometimes you got to get a little bit ways down the road to realize you're doing the wrong thing. But anytime you're planning out the data conversion, take into account the issues, get a professional who knows data conversions, who understands it, get a timeline of that, have somebody who understands the raw data entry, have them create a timeline and go, hey, what's going to take longer, data entry or data conversion? And even with the best data conversions, they at least need to be reviewed, if not cleaned up after the fact.
I think you make a good point. I've been there a million times and have gotten data from a source, started actually analyzing that data before a data conversion, realized how incorrect it is, and had to look back at the client and say, you'd just be better off hand keying this into the system you're trying to get it into, because we can convert this data, right? We may convert 50% of it. And then out of that 50%, how much is wrong?
Well, and
so,
also,
just because it got converted doesn't mean, that's the other thing I've seen with data conversions. You go to the software company, their sales team's like, we'll move you over and get you all taken care of. And you pay the money, and they do actually move the data and put the data conversion, and you go and open up the new one and it's wrong.
Well, and also how much was captured in the first data set, right? And they may not have even captured everything that
you want. So you have blanks everywhere.
So you're going to have to go through it anyways.
Yeah.
Well, might as well just do it from the start, fresh.
I mean, I've been in that data conversion post world where they hand me the software and all I can do is look back and say, that's wrong. And
Yep.
we can change it, or you can redo the conversion. And sometimes I've gone back to the people that have done the conversion and they're like, there's nothing else we can do. That it is what it is. And, you have to look back at your client or whoever you're working with and, bring in the troops and go in there and clean the darn thing up. So there has been times in my life where I've looked at people dead in the eye and said, don't even do it. Just leave that garbage on the outside. We might just be better copying and pasting things if it's right.
Mm-hmm.
Or hand keying it in, or if it's not right and you don't trust it, then that should be your answer right there.
Oh yeah.
That should be your answer right there. So beware while you're out there doing these type of things. Every person that's selling something isn't really always thinking in your best interest as to how you're going to get that thing done. And it goes kind of almost, I would say, for anything. So they make it sound easy. They make it sound great. And then you're knee deep into something and you realize that, oh boy, that didn't work. I mean, I've watched people drop $250,000 in the data conversions that did them nothing. And they were promised that it would be, all good. Everything's going to be all good. And it wasn't until the money's spent, the time is gone, and the board is waiting that we can't do the report you're looking for. The discovery is this is garbage. Yeah. And that's a tough boardroom to walk into. I'll tell you that. I've been there many, many times because of, we gave it a good shot. Yeah. And a lot of times it's not even the fact that the data conversion failed. I mean, if it's just wrong, you should stop. But it's the fact that, again, Coke and Pepsi, you ain't going to get that information into this information.
Sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. So for those of you out there who go through it, this is probably a topic that Kyle and I chat about quite a bit. It's we get brought data conversion thoughts and processes and
every week.
How to handle data, what to do with data. It's not always about converting. It's about managing it, taking care of it, upkeep, housekeeping, the right data. And then you might get crazy and start putting more data together. And how do you do all those things? Write it down, write a path, keep it there. There's so many things that I think that from one data person to another, even writing out an SOP of where I got this and how I got it and how I go about ingesting it. Mm-hmm. So just in case, for some reason your job changes or something happens, somebody else can pick this thing up and you're not stuck with that at the end of the day. So do a little favor to the next tech guy that comes around. Mm-hmm. And I think, watch each other's backs. But yeah, we could probably have data conversion talk all day long in here about the things that we've seen
all day
through the many, many, many years.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of times great, ends to those stories. And sometimes
a lot of times
pretty tough ends and sometimes anywhere in between, honestly, So what do you think today? Data conversion.
I'm going to say man wins because I have yet to see a technology that makes it any easier than Excel, which is basically just being able to visualize both things and do the manual matchup. So when it comes to a data conversion, I think man wins because every time I see technology try to make it easier, it gets worse quality.
Yeah, I have to go with, if it wasn't for man cleaning the data up to get that unique ID right, so then you can just, at that point, you can merge and it's fine. You're right. I don't know of a technology, and if you do, tell us. We would love to hear from anybody that cleans those names up, that matches certain things without it being exact. And the fact that tech literally, it runs into a roadblock and it just can't do it. You're done. You're stuck. And you have to go back and say, this is the only thing we can do. So man has to come up with the game plan. So we're looking for that technology. And I think that one day we might be there. Assimilating technology, something that is close to that could still merge. But how dangerous is that conversation? It kind of looks like an orange. So we're going to put it with the oranges.
Yeah. It's dangerous. I've used tools like that where it's like, oh, well, this thing's 99% similar.
Yeah.
Okay. The Kyle Souza number 2A is very different than the Kyle Souza number 2B.
Right.
even though those names are very similar.
Yeah. So you still have man that has to go in, and granted, the tech may be able to limit down 6,000 to 1,000, and now you have less to look at.
Right.
Right. But don't forget about the 5 that it said it got, and there could be issues inside there. Right. So, as with any tech, start of our conversation was be aware of what you're doing, be aware of what you're loading, be aware of your data, be aware of how the information is going to mesh up and how you're going to get it into something or make it work for you. Okay. Yep. So yeah, I got to give it to man too. And all of you, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, everybody, get us something that makes data assimilation, transformation, conversion easier. If you want to talk about the next big thing, do that. That would be great. We would love to see even more so just something that could maybe even identify really easily these things could be the same. Do you want to accept that or not? So other than Excel, other than Excel. And I know we can get there in some of those. So looks like man wins this one. Man wins this one. The data conversion war is still on, and people can still, at this point in time, make it the best. Yep. That's our opinion, at least. Yeah. Some of you out there dealing data that is just a lot easier. Maybe we just deal with really tough data. Maybe. So there are simple data sets out there. Sure. I used to run warehouses, and it wasn't very complicated to use the SKU number. Yeah. I mean, how does barcode scanner work on your phone and shop for me through 20 different retail stores? Yeah. It uses the UPC. When you create highly standardized data sets, then you can have a very smooth data pipeline. But that's just not how most companies think. No, they don't. They don't use the unique number everywhere. And I think that's that people need to prepare and think about ahead of time. And then you can have successful data conversions and movement and assimilation and analytics and all kinds of crazy different things that are out there. So thanks for joining us today, Man versus Tech. Again, every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central here out of the Woodlands. It's Kyle Souza, Chris Pettigrew. And we hope everybody has a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Hit us up on LinkedIn. Hit us up on anywhere you can. You have all of our contact information. We love talking tech. We're very excited about all the different topics. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, shoot us a message. We're more than happy to integrate different topics that are out there and look into them. Even guests or have guests on the show. So everybody have a great day. Enjoy your Wednesday.